whispers about the Hamiltons, about how they had vanished without a trace. His heart thumped in his chest, but he wasn't about to back down. Not in front of Timmy and the others. God, I hate kids. He took a deep breath and started up the cracked sidewalk. His rubber Frankenstein mask sticking to his face with sweat. The house's front door creaked open with a groan that seemed to come from deep within its bowels. Billy's friends, hidden in the shadows, held their breath, their eyes wide open with anticipation. He stepped onto the porch, the floorboards groaning under his weight. The door was a gaping mouth, beckoning him into the darkness. Inside, the air was thick with dust and a faint scent of decay. The floorboards complained with every step he took, echoing throughout the empty halls. The cobwebs danced in the moonlight that streamed through the broken windows, casting eerie patterns on the dust-covered furniture. A staircase ascended into the unknown, each step leading him closer to his heart's pounding in his ears. He swallowed hard, trying to ignore the voice in his head that screamed for him to turn back. Billy's hand trembled as he reached for the banister, the cold wood feeling like bone under his fingertips. He took the stairs, one at a time, each step a silent promise that he wouldn't chicken out. His eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of life, or something worse. The wallpaper peeled away in strips, revealing the rotted plaster beneath. The shadows grew longer and more sinister, stretching out like the arms of the monsters from his favorite horror comics. As he reached the top of the staircase, a sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, sending a chill down his spine. A door at the end of the hall stood ajar, and a faint light flickered from within. It was the kind of room that was always painted red in the movies. You know the kind that you just knew you weren't supposed to go into. But go into it he did, the dare burning in his mind like a brand. Billy, you're not too bright. The floorboards groaned louder here, as if the house itself was protesting his intrusion. His heart felt like it was trying to escape his chest, thumping so hard it hurt. The door squealed open, revealing a room that looked like a set from a forgotten horror film. Hey, you know what? This is starting to sound like my place. Cobwebs draped the furniture like dusty shrouds, and the shadows danced to the tune of the flickering candlelight. In the center of the room, a grand fireplace, cold and unused, with a dusty, empty hearth. On the mantel above, a collection of porcelain dolls stared back at him, their glass eyes gleaming viciously. The flickering candlelight grew brighter and the shadows grew bolder, stretching out to touch the walls like inky fingers. A low murmur started to fill the room, whispers that grew louder and more insistent. The doll's eyes glowed now, casting an eerie light that painted the room in an unearthly glow. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs refused to move. He was rooted to the spot, his heart racing so fast it was a wonder it didn't explode. I don't know about you, but I think chorus of laughter that was at once childish and ancient. The dolls' heads turned in unison, their unblinking gaze locked onto Billy. He could almost feel their plastic limbs twitching with malicious intent. His mind raced, trying to come up with an escape plan, but fear had gripped him in an icy vice. He was trapped, a fly in their spider's web. The floorboards beneath him gave way with a deafening crack, and Billy plummeted into the cold, black abyss that had been hidden beneath the rotten wood. He screamed, his voice lost in the sudden void. The fall was endless, or so it seemed, until he landed with a bone-jarring thud on the cold, hard surface. The wind knocked out at him. He struggled to breathe, let alone move. The whispers grew louder, closer, and he could feel the dolls descending upon him, their porcelain faces twisted into hideous grins. Billy, why didn't you just leave? Panic surged through him, and he managed to push himself up onto his hands and knees. The room was gone, replaced by a damp, earthy space that smelled of decay and something far more foul. I can almost smell it. The walls were earthen, and the only light came from the glow of the doll's eyes, which had followed him down into the darkness. He stumbled to his feet, his legs unsteady, and began to run, the doll's laughter echoing around him. The ground was slick with some unseen substance, making each step treacherous. The light grew dimmer as he sprinted through the narrow passageway, the walls closing in around him. The doll's eyes grew smaller and farther away, but their laughter remained, taunting him like a siren's call. His lungs burned and his costume was torn and muddled, but fear was the only fuel he needed. He could feel them behind him, their cold, unyielding stare boring into his back. The passage opened up into a chamber, and Billy stumbled out, gasping for air. The space was vast, the ceiling lost in the darkness above. The only light came from the flickering candles that sat atop a makeshift altar at the far end. The walls were lined with shelves, and upon them sat more dolls, all watching him with those unblinking eyes. The haunting laughter grew into a crescendo, bouncing off the walls and filling his head. Billy's eyes fell upon a small, dusty object that glinted in the candlelight. It was a key, resting on a pedestal at the center of the altar. The whispers grew urgent, almost frantic, as if the dolls knew he had found it. He stumbled over to the altar, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and snatched the key. It was cold to the touch, heavy with an unspoken promise of escape. He turned, his eyes searching for a way out, and spotted a heavy wooden door set into the far wall. The doll's eyes followed him. Their laughter made his head spin. He staggered towards the door, the key shaking in his hand. The closer he got, the more the doll's eyes grew, pulsing with an unnatural light that painted the chamber in a sickly green hue. The door was old, the wood warped and scarred with time. With trembling hands, Billy managed to fit the key into the lock. The metal was cold, almost sticky, as as if it had been waiting for his touch. Just making sure that you were paying attention. He turned the key with a click, and the door swung open with a groan that sent shivers down his spine. The outside air rushed in, a sweet relief from the stench of the chamber. He could see the silhouettes of his friends through the crack, their flashlights piercing the gloom. Billy, what happened? Did you find anything? Timmy's voice trembled, betraying his bravado. I bet, looking at me, you didn't think I knew the meaning of bravado, did you? Well, I did! Billy could only nod, clutching the key tightly in his hand. The cold metal seemed to burn with the residue of the terror he had just escaped. The doll's laughter had faded to a whisper, but he could still feel their eyes on him, as if they were watching from the shadows. He stumbled out of the house, gulping down lungfuls of the cool, clean air. The night had never felt so alive, so welcoming. The other kids crowded around him, their faces a mix of awe and fear. What was in there? They whispered, their voices hushed. Billy couldn't find the words to describe the horrors he had seen. The dolls, the whispers, the endless fall. It was too much to put into words. He could only shake his head, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. Timmy stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming his fear. Let's go back in, he suggested. The other kids looked at each other nervously, but none of them objected. They were all too caught up in the thrill of the dare. Billy, however, knew he couldn't go back in there. The house had taken a piece of him, and he wasn't sure he'd come out the same if he did. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I hope those little dumbasses do go back in and get what they deserve. Well, that's the story for now. If you liked it, I've got lots more. If you didn't, then what the hell are you still doing here? Quit looking at me!